She sat on the ground holding a sign. One food equals one night, until a cowboy claimed her before the others. Clara sat on the dusty ground in the middle of the town square, her back against a worn wooden crate. The sun had begun its slow climb into the sky, casting a golden hue over the quiet streets, but the warmth did little to chase away the chill that had settled deep in her bones. She held a sign in her hands, the letters uneven and jagged, reading, "One food equals one night." The paper was worn, corners bent, and smudged from the dirt and rain that had touched it over the last few days. Her stomach growled, a sharp reminder that she hadn't eaten since the previous evening. She had tried to ignore it, to focus on keeping her spirits intact, but hunger has a way of making itself known, even when the mind tries to shut it out. Around her, the town was slowly waking. A few early risers wandered by, carrying baskets of bread, jars of milk, or bundles of vegetables from the market. They glanced at her sign, some with a fleeting look of sympathy, others with curiosity. But most moved on, their attention caught by errands, gossip, or the simple desire to avoid trouble. Clara's hands were calloused and sore from holding the sign for hours. Her fingers were cold despite the warmth of the sun, and she hugged her knees occasionally to feel some semblance of comfort. The square was empty enough that she could hear every sound: the creak of wooden wheels on cobblestone, the distant bark of a dog, the faint clatter of shutters opening on nearby shops. It all felt oddly amplified in the quiet morning. She had been in this situation before, though not exactly like this. Life had not been kind to Clara. She had grown up in a small village on the edge of a river, surrounded by family and friends who cared for her. But one misfortune after another had led her to this point. First, the loss of her parents in a sudden illness, then the collapse of the small home she had inherited, and finally, a series of odd jobs that promised security but offered only temporary relief. Each step had stripped away more of her comfort, leaving her with little more than determination and the ragged clothes on her back. Clara shifted her weight slightly, wincing as a sharp pebble pressed into her leg. Her eyes scanned the street, not expecting much, but always hoping. Sometimes someone would stop, offer her a bit of food, perhaps a coin or two. Small gestures, but enough to remind her that kindness existed, even if it was rare. She tried to stay positive, repeating a simple mantra in her mind: one step at a time, one day at a time. As she watched the town slowly fill with life, a group of children ran past, laughing and shouting. Their joy was loud, full of energy and innocence, a stark contrast to the heavy weariness that weighed her down. Clara smiled faintly, almost embarrassed by the warmth that rose in her chest. She had not seen laughter like that in a long time, not since the days when she had someone to share it with. Despite the heaviness, Clara felt a spark of hope. There was something about the morning: the soft glow of the sun, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the cool breeze brushing her face, that reminded her of better days. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sensation wash over her, imagining herself in a small garden somewhere, sitting under a tree with enough food to eat and a place to rest without worry. But reality was never far behind. She opened her eyes, staring at the worn letters on her sign, reminding herself of her immediate needs. Hours passed slowly. A few townspeople stopped, tossing small coins into her hand or leaving bits of bread near her feet. She accepted them with a quiet nod, grateful, but her stomach still ached, and her body yearned for proper rest. Each small act of kindness brought a flicker of relief, but it was fleeting. Clara had learned the hard way that life in this town would not hand her comfort easily. The market began to grow busier. Merchants called out their goods: fresh vegetables, ripe fruits, fragrant bread, and smoked meats. The sounds of haggling and laughter filled the air. Clara's eyes followed each passerby, her heart silently hoping that someone might stop for her, not out of pity, but with genuine kindness. She noticed the subtle glances from some men lingering a little too long. Their eyes carried an unspoken expectation, a sense that they could take advantage of her situation. Clara's stomach tightened, and her hand gripped the sign more firmly. She had learned to read these looks over time, knowing when danger was near and when it was safe to let her guard down, even slightly. A cool breeze rustled the edges of her sign, making the letters wobble. Clara adjusted her grip, her eyes scanning the street. She had seen this moment countless times. People would stop briefly, consider helping, then continue on their way. Her hope wavered, swinging between cautious optimism and quiet despair. She reminded herself that giving up was not an option, that each day survived was a victory, and that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. By midday, the sun had climbed high and the town square was alive with activity. Clara could feel the heat on her face, but it did little to ease the ache in her body. She shifted, adjusting her position, trying to make herself more comfortable on the hard ground. She noticed a few people whispering as they passed, pointing toward her, but none of them approached. Some were simply curious, others hesitant, unsure of how to act. She had become a fixture in the square, part of the background of town life, almost invisible except to those who chose to see her. Her eyes wandered to the edges of the crowd, noticing a few men standing back, observing. There was something unsettling about the way they lingered, their intentions unclear but their focus unmistakable. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. She adjusted her sign slightly, making sure it was visible to anyone who might pass by. Not because she wanted to draw attention, but because she had learned that being seen could sometimes be a form of protection. As the afternoon wore on, Clara's hope flickered like a candle in the wind. Each passing hour brought new challenges, the ache of hunger, the weight of fatigue, the constant tension of being watched. Yet she remained seated, holding her sign, determined to face the day. She had survived worse, and she would survive this. Somehow, someway, she would find a meal, a place to rest, and perhaps a spark of kindness that might change her day or even her life. Even as her body protested, Clara refused to give in to despair. She took a deep breath, letting the sounds of the bustling town wash over her. She reminded herself that life, though hard and unpredictable, still held moments of beauty, like the laughter of children, the warmth of the sun, and the rare acts of kindness from strangers. These were the things that kept her going, that gave her the strength to hold her sign and sit in the square day after day, waiting for the chance that someone would stop and see her as more than just a figure in need. By late afternoon, Clara's patience began to wear thin. Her stomach growled again, louder this time, a sharp reminder of her pressing need. Yet even with the ache gnawing at her, she kept her posture steady, her eyes alert, scanning the crowd. She refused to let despair take over, clinging to the small hope that someone, anyone, might stop. A man carrying a basket of fresh bread paused briefly, looking at her with something that could have been pity or curiosity, then moved on without a word. Clara exhaled quietly, trying not to let the disappointment show. Even as shadows began to lengthen across the square, Clara stayed put. She knew that giving up now would mean losing more than just a meal. It would mean losing her dignity, the small but crucial part of herself that insisted she keep trying, keep hoping, and keep surviving. The sun dipped lower, casting long, warm shadows over the cobblestones, and Clara's eyes remained fixed on the flow of people, waiting for the one moment that might change everything. The afternoon sun hung high in the sky, warming the cobblestones but doing little to ease the tension Clara felt. She had been sitting in the town square for hours, holding her sign, and now, as the day grew busier, more people passed by. Some ignored her completely, lost in their own errands. Others glanced at her with fleeting curiosity, but none stopped. She shifted her weight, trying to find a more comfortable position, though the hard ground offered little relief. Hunger twisted her stomach like a stubborn knot, reminding her that she couldn't wait forever. Then she noticed them, 3 men lingering at the edge of the square. They were not like the usual townsfolk who hurried past. Their eyes were fixed on her in a way that made her uneasy. One leaned against a post, the other twirled a small coin in his fingers, and the last simply stood with a smirk. Clara could feel her heart rate quicken. She had learned to recognize looks like these. They carried expectation, a sense that they thought they could take advantage of someone vulnerable. She tightened her grip on her sign and kept her eyes on them. The first man approached slowly, speaking in a smooth, practiced voice. "Hey there, little lady," he said. "You look tired. Maybe we can help you in return for a small favor." Clara's stomach lurched. She forced herself to stay calm, keeping her voice steady as she replied, "I don't ask for favors. I only accept food if you can give it freely." The man's smile faltered, but he didn't leave. Instead, he leaned closer, as if trying to intimidate her into agreeing. Clara's hands shook slightly, but she refused to back down. She had been in situations like this before, and she knew that fear could cloud judgment. Keeping her voice soft but firm, she said again, "I only accept kindness." Nothing else. The man laughed under his breath and stepped back, muttering something about her being stubborn, but it was clear he wasn't satisfied. The second man stepped forward, holding a small loaf of bread in one hand. "We could make this worth your while," he said. Clara shook her head, refusing to take it. "I am grateful for food, but I will not do anything in return except survive," she said quietly. She watched the man frown and glance at the other two, realizing she was not someone they could easily manipulate. For a moment, Clara feared that the encounter might escalate. The three men exchanged glances, their intentions unclear, and she could feel the tension in the air thickening. Every instinct screamed at her to stay alert, to not trust them, and to be ready to move if things turned dangerous. But despite her fear, she did not run. She had learned that survival was not just about fleeing, it was also about standing her ground, showing strength even when she felt weak. As the minutes passed, Clara noticed something else. People around the square had begun to slow down and watch, sensing the conflict without fully understanding it. A few murmurs spread through the crowd, whispers of curiosity and concern. Clara kept her eyes forward, refusing to let the attention distract her. She focused on her breathing, the rhythm steadying her nerves. Then, just as tension seemed unbearable, a new figure appeared at the edge of the square. A man on horseback rode slowly into view, dust rising behind him. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face, a worn leather jacket, and boots that had clearly seen many miles of travel. There was a calm confidence in his posture, a quiet authority that made the three men pause. He did not rush, did not call out, but simply rode in, observing the scene as if he had arrived at the perfect moment. Clara noticed him immediately. There was something different about this man. He didn't seem threatening, nor did he seem like someone who would take advantage of her. His eyes, when they met hers, carried a kind of honesty that made her stomach relax just slightly. She didn't know who he was or why he had come, but she felt an instinctive trust, a rare feeling for someone in her position. The man dismounted slowly, tying his horse to a post nearby. He stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the three men who had been troubling her. Without raising his voice, he said, "I think it's time you left." His tone was calm, yet carried an unmistakable authority. The men exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unprepared for someone to challenge them. Clara felt a small surge of hope. One of the men laughed nervously. "And who are you to tell us what to do?" he asked. The cowboy tilted his head slightly, eyes unwavering. "Someone who believes that people should be treated with respect," he said simply. The words were quiet, but firm enough to make the men reconsider their position. They muttered curses under their breath and slowly retreated, clearly frustrated. Clara watched silently, her heart still pounding. Relief washed over her as the last of the men disappeared into the crowd. She felt a warmth in her chest, the first real sense of safety she had felt in days. The cowboy turned to her, his face now partially visible under the brim of his hat. He offered a small, kind smile. "Are you all right?" he asked. His voice was gentle, and Clara found herself nodding, though her throat was too tight to speak immediately. "Yes, I think so," she whispered finally. She looked at him carefully, noting the way he carried himself, strong, steady, and unthreatening. "Thank you," she added, her voice barely above a whisper. The cowboy nodded, as if acknowledging her gratitude without needing more. He reached into a small bag he carried and pulled out a piece of bread and some cheese. "Eat," he said simply, handing it to her. Clara hesitated for a moment, still wary of kindness, but her hunger was stronger than her doubt. She took the food with trembling hands and began to eat slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a treasure. The cowboy watched patiently, giving her space but remaining close enough to ensure no one else approached. As she ate, Clara's mind raced. She didn't understand why this man had intervened or why he had offered help without expectation. It was unfamiliar territory, and yet, for the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. She realized that maybe, just maybe, there were people who helped simply because it was right, not because they wanted something in return. After a few moments, she finally looked up, meeting the cowboy's eyes. Why are you helping me?" she asked, curiosity and caution mixing in her voice. The cowboy shrugged lightly. "Because everyone deserves a little kindness," he said. There was no hint of judgment or condescension, only sincerity. Clara blinked, surprised by the simplicity and honesty of the answer. The crowd around them began to resume its normal rhythm, though a few people still glanced their way, curious about the interaction they had witnessed. Clara felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. She had faced many challenges, many people who saw her only as an opportunity, but this man seemed different. He had stepped in not out of obligation or gain, but out of principle. By the time the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the square, Clara had finished her food. Her energy had returned slightly and her spirits lifted. The cowboy offered her a hand, helping her stand. She hesitated at first, unused to trusting anyone, but eventually accepted. She felt steadier not just physically but emotionally as well. Where will I sleep tonight?" Clara asked quietly, the question lingering in the cool evening air. The cowboy looked thoughtful for a moment, then nodded. "I know a place," he said simply. "You'll be safe there." Clara didn't know what to say. For the first time in a long time, she felt as if the world might offer her more than just survival. Maybe, just maybe, it could offer her safety and kindness too. As they walked together toward the edge of the town square, Clara felt a strange but welcome sense of relief. She didn't know what the future held, and she didn't yet understand who this man truly was, but she knew one thing: today had changed everything. For the first time in days, she felt seen, protected, and most importantly, not entirely alone. The evening air was cool as Clara walked beside the cowboy, whose name she had learned was Luke. He moved with ease, the weight of experience in each step, while Clara kept her gaze on the ground, careful not to stumble on the uneven stones of the town streets. The sounds of the town had softened. Merchants were closing their shops, the laughter of children had faded, and the occasional call of a passerby echoed faintly through the dimming light. For Clara, the quiet was both soothing and strange. She had grown used to constant worry and the feeling of being watched, and now, walking beside Luke, she felt something unfamiliar: safety. Luke led her through winding alleys she had never noticed before, past buildings she had assumed were abandoned, and finally to a small, modest inn on the edge of town. The sign above the door creaked gently in the evening breeze. It was nothing fancy, but the warm light spilling from its windows promised comfort and security, something Clara had long thought impossible. She stopped for a moment at the threshold, hesitation written across her face. "Are you sure?" she asked softly, her voice almost lost in the quiet of the street. Luke nodded. "It's a good place. The owner is fair. You'll have food and a bed tonight." There was no pressure in his words, only assurance. Clara swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making her eyes water. She had faced nights on the streets, cold and hungry, with no one to care for her. The thought of a warm meal and a safe bed almost overwhelmed her. Inside, the inn was cozy. A small fireplace glowed in the corner, and the faint smell of cooked stew lingered in the air. A woman behind the counter smiled kindly as Luke introduced Clara. "She'll stay the night," he said. "Please take care of her." The woman nodded, understanding the unspoken trust in Luke's voice, and gestured to a simple room at the back of the inn. Clara's eyes widened as she stepped inside the room. It was small but clean, with a neatly made bed, a wooden chair, and a window overlooking the quiet street. For a long moment, she simply stood there, taking it all in, as if afraid it might vanish the second she turned her back. Luke gave her a gentle nod before stepping to the door. "I'll be outside if you need me," he said quietly. "I'll check back in the morning." Clara nodded, unsure of how to respond. Words felt inadequate, yet her heart overflowed with gratitude. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of relief, not just for herself, but for the possibility of starting over. She sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of warmth and safety slowly sinking in. She could still feel the hunger in her stomach, but the ache was now mixed with comfort, a strange but welcome combination. As she washed her hands in the small basin by the window, Clara reflected on the events of the day. She remembered sitting in the town square, surrounded by strangers who saw her only as an opportunity, and then Luke's sudden arrival. He had appeared like a calm presence in a storm, standing firm when others had faltered. She realized she had not felt fear and hope at the same time for a long while. It was confusing, yet liberating. Dinner was brought to her room soon after, a simple stew with bread, enough to fill her stomach and warm her body. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, realizing how long it had been since she had food that did not come from scraps or hurried generosity. The flavors were rich and comforting, not extravagant, but perfect for someone who had survived hunger for so long. Clara closed her eyes briefly, letting the warmth of the food and the room seep into her tired body. As she finished eating, she thought about Luke again. She wondered who he was, why he had chosen to help her, and whether kindness like his truly existed in the world. She wanted to ask, but the question felt too personal too soon. Instead, she focused on gratitude, letting herself rest without shame. For a long time, she had felt the weight of the world pressing down on her, and now she had a moment, brief, fragile, but real, of peace. After dinner, Clara settled onto the bed, pulling the blanket close around her shoulders. She lay there quietly, listening to the soft creaks of the inn, the occasional murmur from the hallway, and the faint rustle of wind against the windows. It was peaceful, a sharp contrast to the chaos of the day, and her mind wandered. She thought about her life before, her family, the village she had lost, and the small dreams she had once held. They seemed distant now, but she realized that hope could return even in small measures. Luke returned before long as he had promised. He knocked gently on the door. "Mind if I come in for a minute?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "No, please," she said softly, moving aside to let him enter. He stepped in, his expression calm and steady. He did not sit immediately, instead standing by the window looking out at the quiet street. "You handled yourself well today," he said after a moment, his voice quiet but confident. "It's not easy standing your ground when people think they can take advantage of you." Clara felt a warmth rise in her chest at his words. For the first time, she felt seen, not just as someone in need, but as a person with strength and courage. "I had no choice," she replied. I couldn't let them control me." Luke nodded. "And that's why you're still here standing." Most people would have given in. His eyes met hers briefly, steady and unwavering, and Clara felt a strange sense of reassurance. There was no judgment in his gaze, only respect. They spoke quietly for a while, sharing small stories about life, the town, and their experiences. Clara learned that Luke had traveled far, helping people when he could, never expecting anything in return. There was a simplicity to his life, yet a depth of character that fascinated her. She felt drawn to his honesty, the calm strength that seemed to radiate from him effortlessly. As the night deepened, Clara realized she had not slept peacefully in months. The events of the day, the kindness she had received, and the warmth of the inn all combined to ease her weary mind. She felt a small smile creep onto her face as she lay back, pulling the blanket snugly around her. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that tomorrow might be better. Luke gave her a gentle nod before leaving, promising to return in the morning. Clara closed her eyes, letting exhaustion take over. She dreamed not of hunger or fear, but of open fields, warm sunlight, and moments of simple happiness she had long forgotten. Through the night, she slept soundly, feeling the rare comfort of protection and care. For the first time, she understood that safety and trust could exist, even after hardship and betrayal. She realized that life, though difficult, still had moments of unexpected kindness, and those moments could change everything. As dawn approached, the first light crept into her room, casting a soft glow across the floor. Clara stirred, feeling the warmth of the bed beneath her and the lingering hope in her heart. She knew that the day ahead would bring challenges, but for the first time she felt ready to face them. She had Luke, someone who had shown her kindness without expectation, and that gave her courage. Clara rose from the bed, pulling on her worn clothes and gathering her few belongings. She felt stronger, more determined than she had in weeks. The world outside still held uncertainty and danger, but she now knew that she could survive it, not just through desperation, but through careful trust and courage. As she stepped to the window, looking out at the quiet street below, she felt a sense of possibility. The town, once a place of worry and fear, now seemed full of potential, if she only chose to see it. And with Luke nearby, she knew that tomorrow could be different, that survival might not just be about getting through the day, but about finding moments of connection, hope, and genuine kindness in the world. The morning sun filtered gently through the small window of Clara's room, casting a warm glow over the modest furnishings. She stretched, feeling the comforting weight of the blanket still draped over her shoulders. For the first time in weeks, she had slept without the gnawing anxiety of hunger or fear pressing on her chest. The room felt safe, and for a moment she allowed herself to simply enjoy the peace. Luke had already left for the day, telling her that he would be back in the afternoon. Clara knew he would keep his word. He had proven himself trustworthy, but a small part of her still felt the old wariness, the ingrained caution that had kept her alert on the streets. She reminded herself that caution was survival, but hope could coexist with it. Today, she decided, she would take her first small steps toward reclaiming her independence. After washing her face and preparing for the day, Clara stepped out into the inn's common room. The warm smell of fresh bread and brewing tea filled the air. The innkeeper, a kind middle-aged woman named Martha, smiled at her as she entered. "Good morning, Clara," she said warmly. "Sleep well?" Clara nodded, trying to return the smile. "Yes, thank you, very well." She felt a flicker of gratitude rise in her chest. Simple kindnesses like Martha's felt like luxuries now, rare and precious, yet they reminded her that not everyone in the world sought to harm her. Breakfast was a modest meal, porridge with honey and a slice of bread, but it tasted extraordinary to Clara. Each bite was savored, a reminder of what she had been missing for so long. As she ate, she reflected on how quickly life had changed for her in the span of a single day. From sitting alone on the dusty ground, vulnerable and anxious, she had found safety, food, and a hint of hope. It was overwhelming but also grounding. After finishing her meal, Clara felt restless. She had been inactive for so long, waiting for life to offer her an opportunity, that the sudden freedom of movement felt strange. Luke had said she could explore the town if she wished, but she wasn't sure where to go or what to do. Every street seemed familiar and foreign at the same time. She stepped outside cautiously, breathing in the crisp morning air. The town had awakened fully now, bustling with merchants, townsfolk, and children running to school. Clara walked slowly, observing the familiar sights from a new perspective. She noticed small things she had never paid attention to before. The way the baker carefully stacked fresh loaves, the laughter of a group of children playing near a fountain, the gentle sway of flower pots outside the windows of small homes. The world felt alive, and for the first time she felt like she belonged somewhere, even if just temporarily. As she wandered, Clara became aware that a few men were watching her from a distance, the same ones who had tried to intimidate her the day before. Her stomach clenched at the sight, but she refused to panic. She had survived encounters like this before, and she now had allies, people who had shown her that not everyone was out to take advantage of her. Her resolve strengthened. Before she could consider retreating, Luke appeared beside her. He had ridden into town on horseback and had dismounted with quiet ease, his calm presence immediately putting her nerves at ease. "Morning," he said simply, his eyes scanning the area as if aware of the men observing them. "They're still around, but don't worry, I'll make sure they don't cause trouble." Clara felt a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. I don't know what I would do without you." Luke gave a faint smile. "You're stronger than you think. I'm just here to help you see it for yourself." His words struck Clara deeply. They weren't condescending. They were sincere, and they gave her a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt in a long time. Together, they walked back toward the inn, but Luke suggested stopping by the town's small market first. "You need to get some things," he said. "Clothes, supplies, some things to make your stay easier." Clara felt a thrill of independence at the idea. She had rarely had the luxury of choice before, and even small decisions now felt empowering. At the market, Clara carefully selected a few simple items: a sturdy pair of shoes, a warm shawl, and some basic supplies like soap and a cloth for washing. Luke guided her gently, offering advice without taking control. He showed her how to bargain politely, how to assess the quality of items, and how to recognize when something was a good deal. Clara listened intently, absorbing each lesson, feeling her confidence grow with every small success. As they moved through the market, the three men who had harassed her the day before appeared again, lingering near the stalls, trying to catch her attention. Clara's heart skipped a beat, but Luke stayed close, subtly placing himself between her and the men. He didn't speak loudly or make threats. His calm presence alone was enough to discourage them. The men muttered under their breath and eventually walked away, their expressions a mixture of frustration and disbelief. Clara felt a deep sense of relief wash over her. For the first time, she realized that she could navigate the world without constant fear. She had someone to watch her back, yes, but she was also learning to stand tall herself. Every step she took alongside Luke, every small victory in the market, reminded her that strength came in many forms, sometimes quiet, sometimes steady, and sometimes through the kindness of others. After the market, they returned to the inn, and Clara spent the afternoon organizing her small room, arranging her belongings, and even finding a little space to write in a small notebook Luke had noticed she carried. Writing had always been a comfort for her, a way to process her thoughts and dreams, and now, in a safe space, it became a source of joy once again. She filled the pages with reflections, hopes, and small plans for the future, feeling her spirit lighten with each word. Luke watched quietly from the doorway, giving her space but remaining close enough to offer guidance if needed. They shared small conversations, laughter at minor missteps, and quiet silences that were comfortable rather than awkward. Clara realized that connection could exist without pressure, that trust could grow slowly, and that people could care without expecting anything in return. As evening approached, Luke suggested a walk outside to enjoy the sunset. Clara agreed, and together they strolled toward a small hill overlooking the town. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the sun casting long shadows over the streets below. Clara felt a sense of wonder she hadn't experienced in years. The world was larger than her struggles, and there was beauty to be found even in ordinary moments. Sitting together on a large rock, Clara and Luke watched the sun dip below the horizon. She felt a mixture of gratitude, hope, and cautious optimism. "I never thought I'd see a day like this," she admitted softly. "A day without fear, without worry." Luke nodded, his eyes on the fading light. "Life is full of challenges," he said quietly, "but it's also full of moments like this, moments that remind us why we keep going." Clara leaned back, letting the warmth of the last sunlight wash over her. For the first time, she felt not just safe, but capable. She realized that Luke had not only protected her, but he had helped her see her own strength, something she had forgotten existed. As darkness settled over the town, they walked back to the inn, their steps slow and unhurried. Clara felt a sense of calm determination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she knew she could face them, not as a desperate, fearful girl on the streets, but as someone learning to reclaim her life. She had found a mentor, a protector, and perhaps, in time, a friend. Inside the inn, Clara prepared for bed with a lighter heart. She wrote a few more words in her notebook, capturing the day's events and her feelings. She realized that life was not just about surviving, but about learning, growing, and finding moments of connection that made the struggle worthwhile. As she lay down, the sounds of the inn quieted around her. Luke had gone to attend to his own matters, leaving her in peace. Clara closed her eyes, feeling a sense of gratitude she hadn't known in years. The day had been challenging in small ways, yes, but it had also been transformative. She had faced fear, learned to trust, and discovered that even in hardship there could be guidance, protection, and hope. Sleep came gently that night, filled not with dreams of fear or hunger, but with possibilities. Clara understood more clearly than ever that her journey was far from over. The world outside was still unpredictable, but she no longer felt powerless. She had allies, she had courage, and she had learned that strength could be quiet, steady, and patient. And with that realization, Clara drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, knowing that she was no longer alone in the world. The morning sun broke over the horizon, bathing the small town in soft, golden light. Clara awoke slowly, stretching beneath the cozy blanket that had become her comfort over the past few days. The warmth of the inn and the lingering sense of safety made it difficult to remember the fear and uncertainty she had lived with just a short time ago. She rose quietly, careful not to wake the few other guests, and went to the small basin by the window to wash her face. The water was cool and refreshing, and she felt a renewed sense of energy, enough to face the new day with determination. Luke had already left for the day, but he had promised to return later. Clara felt a quiet excitement at the thought. He had become more than a protector. He was a guide, someone who had helped her reclaim a small piece of her independence and confidence. Today, she decided, she would take further steps toward building her life, however small those steps might be. She dressed carefully, selecting the warm shawl and sturdy shoes she had purchased the day before. Each piece of clothing felt like armor, a tangible sign that she was no longer just the vulnerable girl who had sat on the dusty ground with a sign. She carried her small notebook with her, a place to write thoughts, plans, and dreams, tiny seeds of hope she had nurtured over the past days. After a simple breakfast provided by Martha, the innkeeper, Clara stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The town was beginning to stir. Merchants opened their shops, the smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the streets, and children's laughter echoed as they ran to school. Clara paused for a moment, taking it all in. She realized she was no longer just an observer of life, someone waiting passively for survival. Today, she felt like a participant, capable of making choices and shaping her own path. Her first stop was the market. She walked confidently among the stalls, examining vegetables, fruits, and small household items. The merchants greeted her politely, some remembering her from the previous day. Clara noticed the small changes in her own demeanor, the way she held her head high, the way she met others' eyes without fear, and the calm, deliberate movements of her hands. She had learned from Luke not just how to protect herself, but how to present herself as someone who deserved respect and kindness. While shopping, Clara noticed the three men who had caused her trouble earlier. They lingered at the edge of the market, watching her from a distance. She felt a flicker of unease, but it no longer had the power to paralyze her. Instead, she walked with quiet confidence, aware of her surroundings and ready to act if necessary. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. As she selected fresh vegetables and a few baked goods, Luke arrived, as promised. He smiled when he saw her, a subtle mix of pride and reassurance in his gaze. "Good morning," he said. "Looks like you're handling yourself well." Clara smiled back, feeling warmth at his words. "I'm learning," she said simply. "Thanks to you." Luke's eyes twinkled with quiet approval. "You've always had the strength, I'm just helping you see it." Together they continued through the market. Luke offered advice where needed, and Clara listened attentively. Each interaction, each decision, felt like a step toward reclaiming her life. By the time they returned to the inn, Clara carried not only supplies, but also a sense of accomplishment and growing confidence. The afternoon passed with small tasks around the inn, helping Martha with cleaning, organizing her room, and even preparing a simple meal. Clara discovered a new rhythm in life, one that combined routine with small moments of joy and discovery. She felt her body grow stronger, her mind clearer, and her heart lighter. She began to understand that survival was not just about food and shelter, but about finding balance, purpose, and moments of connection. Later, Luke suggested they take a walk outside the town, toward the open fields at the edge. The idea filled Clara with quiet anticipation. She had seen little of the world beyond the streets and alleys, and the thought of open space brought a sense of freedom she had not felt in years. They walked together, side by side, the sun casting long shadows over the path. Clara felt a mixture of awe and wonder as the town fell behind them and the open fields stretched out before her, filled with tall grasses swaying gently in the breeze. They found a small, shaded area near a grove of trees and sat together, taking in the view. Clara felt the weight of her past struggles lift slightly as she watched the horizon, imagining a future that could be brighter than anything she had dared to hope for. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I never thought I'd see a place like this again." Luke nodded. "Sometimes we forget that beauty exists because we're too focused on surviving, but it's always there, waiting for us to notice." Clara realized he was right. She had been so consumed by fear and need that she had missed the small joys of life. The warmth of sunlight, the sound of wind through the trees, the simple pleasure of walking freely without fear. Now, with Luke by her side, she could begin to appreciate these moments and carry them with her, even into the challenges that lay ahead. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Luke suggested they head back. The walk back to the town was quiet, filled with a comfortable silence. Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude for the trust, guidance, and protection Luke had provided. She understood that life would still have hardships, but she now had a foundation of courage, resourcefulness, and hope to build upon. Back at the inn, Clara prepared for the evening. She cooked a simple dinner, practiced small skills Luke had taught her, like budgeting her supplies and keeping her room organized, and reflected on the growth she had achieved in just a few days. She realized that strength was not just physical, it was emotional and mental, and it was something she had in abundance, even if she had not recognized it before. Luke returned before nightfall, as he had promised. They shared the meal together, laughing softly at minor mishaps and enjoying the quiet companionship. Clara realized that she felt a sense of belonging she had not known in years. She was no longer entirely alone, nor was she entirely dependent. She had agency, support, and a vision for the future, small but real steps toward rebuilding her life. After dinner, they sat outside under the stars. The sky was clear and the night air was cool and gentle. Clara felt a sense of wonder as she gazed upward, marveling at the vastness of the world and the small but meaningful place she now held within it. Luke watched her quietly, his presence steady and reassuring. "You've come a long way," he said softly. From the girl sitting alone in the square to someone who can stand tall and make choices for herself. Clara smiled, a mixture of pride and gratitude shining in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Luke shook his head gently. "You could. You just needed to see it for yourself. I'm glad I could help." As the night deepened, Clara felt a sense of peace unlike anything she had experienced in years. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that she was capable of facing them. She had learned to trust, to be cautious without fear, and to recognize strength within herself. And most importantly, she had discovered that kindness and connection could exist even in a harsh world. When she finally lay down to sleep, Clara reflected on her journey, from desperation and fear to hope and empowerment. The days ahead were still uncertain, but she now faced them with courage, resilience, and the knowledge that she was not alone. Luke had become more than a protector. He was a guide and a friend, someone who had shown her the power of trust, patience, and care. As she drifted into sleep, the moonlight softly illuminating the room, Clara felt a sense of optimism she had not known in years. She had survived the harshness of life, learned to trust again, and begun to reclaim her independence. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, challenges, and discoveries, but for the first time she was ready to meet them with strength, hope, and courage. The story of the girl who had once sat on the dusty ground with a sign now became a story of resilience and renewal. Clara had transformed her life, not just through the kindness of others, but through her own courage and determination. And with the support of those who truly cared, she was ready to step into a future filled with possibility, dignity, and hope.